Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Film church.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Mijo, you're an angel. You're a saint. You're Mother Teresa. You're Elvis. You're God. And if you'd shown up 10 minutes earlier, we'd still have Jackie Boy's head.
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio. This is the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday. I'm Brandon.
I'm Lewis.
And we're here to talk about movies. Each week, Lewis and I alternate picking a film for both of us to watch and discuss. This month, it's all about noir films. And since it's episode 50, I decided to pick an old favorite film of mine, Sin City from 2005. This film was brought to life by Robert Rodriguez. It is directed by Rodriguez and Frank Miller. There's a special guest director, Quentin Tarantino, for a scene. It stars Bruce Willis, Mickey Rourke, Benicio del Toro, Jessica Alba, Rosario Dawson, Brittany Murphy, Clive Owen, and many others. This movie was a favorite of mine when I was like 17 to like 20, probably. I told everyone this was my favorite film, and it inspired me a lot. And Rodriguez is one of my first like director obsessions. He's one of the cinema gods for me, as we talk about here on Film Church Radio. So I decided, like I said, because it's episode 50 and it's noir, that I would pick a film that means a lot to me in my history as a filmmaker. So I know Lewis has already seen this film. I'm excited to dive into it and really break it down and talk about everything Rodriguez here in a moment. We're going to get into it. Just wait. First of all, episode 50. Can you believe it?
I can't. I was going to say a little bit later, but I guess I'll say it now that a few days ago you said that you had listened back to like one of the early episodes, and I went and did the same, and I can't believe that, where we are now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I listened to episode 3, which was ever since episode 3 we've been doing one a week.
Yeah,
we did episode 1 like about 6 months before that, and then a few months later we did episode 2, and it just took us a bit to kind of get the show going and make it a regular thing. And then once we got to episode 3 on, it's been awesome, once a week. And yeah, it was cool to go back and listen to our conversation because we're both at like this turning point.
Yeah.
And I was had just finished a big milestone of film school and stuff, and it was very encouraging to go back and listen to that and be like, man, so much has happened. Yeah.
It was very bizarre to hear myself put into words what I was feeling a year ago.
Yeah.
And because you just get so sidetracked, it just becomes another number. It's just like, oh, it's episode 50, But when you kind of put it into the context of everything, it's really nice to have that forever, to be able to kind of go back in, and just remember kind of where we were at that point. I can still remember when we recorded the first episode. Mm-hmm. I mean, I say I can still remember like it was, 100 years ago when it was only a year ago, but still, it was...
But still, for only being a year ago, it's weird to go back and listen to it and be like, be in a completely different headspace now.
Yeah, we literally had no form. We were just like, guess we've started recording, here we go.
Yeah.
Here's a free-form conversation. And it's nice to know that we've kind of developed into more of a structured thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be, like you said, it's going to be nice to like keep having this podcast to be able to go back and listen to where we were at in our lives.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the point where there's been enough distance between me and a film that when I go back and watch it, I'm like, I wonder what I thought when I first watched this film.
Yeah.
So I can go back and listen to like the Badlands episode, for example, or, the Wander Darkly, the episode, those kind of films where will it work as well on the second watch? So when I go back, it's going to be fun to be able to go back and listen to those.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of which, listener, you should go and listen to all these episodes that we're talking about. We are everywhere on the internet at Film Church Radio, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. YouTube, we've got some extra content. We've been doing, for the last 3 months, we've been having a guest on the first Sunday every month, and we do a video podcast for that, which you can see on our YouTube channel, see our faces, see what we look like and not just sound like. And then and speaking of which, on the last episode, Thief, Mitch had some comments about the movie that he was thinking about after we recorded the show, so he commented on the YouTube video. So go check that out if you want to jump in and be a part of the conversation. Leave us some comments and we'll reply to you and get into a deeper discussion on these films. Same with this film that we're talking about here today. And there's a few extra reviews that, aside from just our Sunday episodes, we've got like an MCU review and Obi-Wan Kenobi discussion on there. So go check that out. And thanks for being here.
Yeah.
It's time for our little pre-discussion. Kind of like trailers before the feature. Lewis, you have a ton of movies.
I'm not going to talk about all of these movies.
Okay.
Yeah, so with us having a guest last week, this is kind of like 2 weeks worth of films together. So Halloween has passed, so the horror movies I watched are going to be put to the side, apart from one, because we both watched it.
Yeah.
So, we got to the end of Halloween and it was the classics. It was Halloween and other kind of big hitters. And then because we're in Noirvember, I watched They Live by Night from 1948, directed by Nicholas Ray. Kind of his first feature film. And Nicholas Ray is a director that's always kind of interested me. I watched Johnny Guitar earlier this year, and it was the same director. And this is, I know that you love first films, like first features. This is a very interesting one to watch because it's such a classic style to it, with it being a noir, like the camera and everything's really great. But there's also those flourishes in there that you can tell he's kind of like pushing the boundaries. Like there's a shot from a helicopter, which you don't see that often in kind of, B noir films. And it was really interesting. It's been one that I've been wanting to watch for a while, so I'm glad I finally managed to crack into it. Yeah. And then I watched a few newer releases. So we watched The Good Nurse, that was on Netflix with Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne. I'm not a huge fan of Eddie Redmayne as an actor, and I'm not really sure why. I really don't like his portrayal of certain people, I guess. Mm-hmm. And nothing against him. I've seen interviews with him. I'm sure he's a really lovely guy and all that kind of stuff. I'm just not a massive fan of him, which is fine. So we went into this a bit kind of trepidatiously, I guess. And it was fine. It's an all right story, but I kind of talked to you a little bit about it. All these Netflix films that they're just churning out at the moment and kind of all the distribution, they just feel so hollow. There doesn't seem to be anybody else in there apart from the lead actors. There's no like wide shots. Yeah, there's no like extras. It's just like every room feels minimal and cold, and that's probably maybe what they were going for. A lot of it, because they work on the ward at night. A lot of it's very, very dark. And it was a fine thriller. It was probably about 40 minutes too long. I think it could have probably been cut down a little bit. It's a shame that these films for Netflix are getting these big names and just, you can tell it's just to get the story doesn't matter.
Yeah.
there's no
There's
there's no yeah
deep meaning or thought, or
yeah exactly.
it's kind of like just a job for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like very early on like what is happening, so the tension just kind of goes, and they try and build it up at certain points, but it doesn't really work. A film that did work for me though was See How They Run, from this last year. It got a theatrical release, and then recently on HBO Max. It's kind of, I feel like we're going for a really, really great time of like these murder mystery kind of Agatha Christie style murder mystery films. We had the Knives Out. We've got the Poirot films with I forgot his name, Kenneth Branagh. And now we've got this which is based around Agatha Christie stage play with Sam Rockwell and
Nice.
Yeah, amongst a great cast, and it's just a really fun hour and a half.
Yeah,
it's kind of it keeps you guessing. There's some really funny bits, some bits that are a bit spooky, I guess. But yeah, we had a really good time with it. It's not going to set the world alight. It's not a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a good popcorn film, and sometimes that's exactly what you want.
Yeah. It sounds like a good movie. I'm looking at the poster and stuff too, and it just makes me like sad that this is just on streaming. Like not
the See How They Run.
Yeah.
It did get a theatrical release.
Oh, it did.
So yeah, it did earlier over the summer.
I must have just missed it. I guess they don't really spend any money on marketing either, though. It's like
no, I
I'm
know,
not
yeah,
paying like close attention.
Yeah, but I think it. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know how much it did, but I think it did okay business. It seems to be kind of front and center on HBO at the moment. But yeah, if you get a chance, I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I've started a really ridiculous task. So on Letterboxd, there's always lists. There's always people that put these lists out, and I sent you the one for Tarantino's new book the other day, where someone had made a list of every single film he mentions, which is, I can't remember the exact number, but it was very high. And someone had made a list for the 1,001 films you've got to see before you die. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go through this chronologically and start ticking off, some of the ones that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised, but I've never seen The Great Train Robbery, which is 1903. I think it's credited with being the first kind of narrative film to break through.
Yeah.
And it was just on, like, I watched it on YouTube because it's public domain now. It was like 16 minutes. And I didn't rate it because I feel like films like this are so hard to rate because on the one side, it's like the history behind it and kind of what it might set up in film is just, unparalleled. You can't put it into words. But on the other hand,
you can't be like, I wasn't entertained by that.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other hand, it's like the camera is very static. It doesn't move. There's scenes that take place just from one angle. There's someone gets thrown off a train, and you can tell it's like made out of pillows. So there's these little things there. But I'm probably watching it in the definition, 4 times what they would have ever expected it to be shown at.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't rate it. I don't think you can, but I want to tick off all these big misses.
Yeah, is that the one that has the cowboy that like points the gun right at the camera and
at the
shoots
end,
it?
shoots.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And people like screamed.
Yeah,
in theaters.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But, and I mean the good thing about like most silent films is they're free on YouTube. Because they're in public domain. So, gonna try and knock some of these off. And then I already kind of hit a stumbling block because the next one is Birth of a Nation, which I haven't watched for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I've never watched it all the way through.
I know that again, it's very significant for the history of cinema, but I'm also like, we live in America now. where these things still haven't changed. So I don't really want to watch a film from the side of the Klan.
For anybody that thinks that like racism doesn't exist, go watch Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
And then an interesting fact about that film is that it was the first film to ever be shown in the White House. So,
yeah,
America.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Cinema history.
I know. Yeah, trying to. I know that was ending on a bit of a bum note. The other film that I watched that I teased earlier, the horror film that I know you've watched, so we can segue into yours as well, is Barbarian.
Yes, I did watch that.
So,
spoilers ahead.
Yes, there's. It's hard to talk about this film without spoilers.
Yeah,
because if you've seen the trailer, it doesn't include much past the 20-minute mark.
Yeah, it subverts your expectation.
Yeah. Another film that kind of went up on streaming pretty close to Halloween, so I heard a lot of hype. So we both sat down to watch it, and it looks like you loved it.
Did I rate it this high? I'm like looking here at my rating. I'm like, surely I did not rate it this high. This might be a typo. I don't think I rated it 5 out of 5. But
yeah, that's kind of what I was like.
Let me just double check my diary here in my my letterbox.
Not to say that it's not. I mean, worthy of being 5 stars.
I rated it 4.5. Apparently. And I think that's because I did get into it. Like it's not it's not like any kind of auteur work or any kind of prestigious film or anything, but it did its job as far as like subverting my expectation. It did its job as like a thrilling horror movie.
Yeah.
I really got into it. I was screaming at the TV. I was like, "Don't go down there!" Like, what are you doing? Dear God, what is this? Like, and it probably could have been a 5 if the ending had been a little bit less like. It just seemed like they almost gave up at the end. And they were like, "Oh well, at this point we can just make it ridiculous." And it was like, well, it was pretty grounded the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Until like the very end.
Yeah.
And I wish that they could have just figured out a more clever way to do it instead of being like, the audience is having a good time, so they'll follow us to this point.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I feel like, especially with horror films like this, it's always hard to end it that isn't either, self-serving and setting itself up for a sequel, or just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
The final, 20 minutes, 15 minutes of it is very, I don't know. Yeah, it did lose me a little bit.
Yeah.
But Justin Long's good.
Yeah, Justin Long is good. I mean, everybody in it's good. Skarsgård, is it Bill Skarsgård?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You kind of think he's going to be the bad guy just because he's, he plays it. And
yeah.
you kind of just expect it almost.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. So, I mean, I get the hype,
Mm-hmm.
It got me. Yeah. I don't know that I ever need to watch it again, but, it was good.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I feel like a lot of these films, and I feel like because it's Halloween, it gets a bit more slack. I guess people want to go and be scared, and there was bits in it that was scary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's one of those things that enough people were talking about that I think they're trying to make it like the indie film of the year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, it's not that good.
Yeah. It's good for a horror movie, but it's not the indie film of the year. It's not going to win any Oscars.
Yeah.
I don't think. It's not, Parasite.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not Parasite. Yeah, and that's an interesting parallel to draw between the two, though. To be fair,
Yeah, yeah. So think about that.
yeah, I might write a blog post.
Yeah.
Is Barbarian the new Parasite?
I mean, Justin Long for Best Actor any day of the week.
Mm.
But so other horror movies I watched were X, which I know you've seen. And I actually rated it less than you. I think I did 3 out of 5.
Yeah,
And you know, I mean, it was good. It was fine. It
Yeah.
wasn't like it didn't. I think it just bothered me, just like you know. Yes, it's creepy and disturbing or whatever, but I think just the whole plot of, again, spoilers ahead for X, the A24 film. The whole plot of like old people are gross
yeah,
is just like, you know, it's like there came to a point in the movie, I guess, you know, like before the old couple had sex, I was just starting to make fun of the movie because I was just like, oh no, like, please tell me that the like horrific climax of the movie isn't, oh, old people are having sex now. Like,
yeah,
you know, yes, they're disgusting people as far as characters, but like just to be like, yeah, old people's bodies, ew, is just like, come on.
yeah,
Especially after watching Barbarian. Like we watched
Yeah.
it like the next day, which it was kind of it was almost the same, you know, even though like the chick in Barbarian is like, I guess like a inbred person and whatever, she's still kind of this old lady thing,
yeah.
you know, and it's just like this theme in horror movies of being like, yeah, old people are gross. This will
Yeah, I
scare
mean-
them.
Yeah, I feel like it's the new thing. I mean, before it used to be like disfigurements.
Yeah.
Anyone with a disfigurement was the villain. So now it's like, how can we make the audience know that they are different than you? And it's like, let's make them old.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
next it's going to be like baby killers. I don't know. They're just going
Yeah,
to
who
swing the
knows?
opposite direction. But yeah, there's always got to be that sense of like the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, unfortunately now it's older people.
Yeah. And then another horror movie I watched was American Werewolf in London from 1981, and it was
Ooh.
amazing. First
yeah.
time I'd ever seen it. 5 out of 5. Like if you have not seen this film, like the effects, the story, all of it is just
Yeah.
5 out of 5. It's such a good
brilliant.
movie.
Yeah. It's one of those films that as soon as I finish watching it, I'm like, I want to go back and watch that again.
Yeah.
There's so much to it. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I'm gonna have to maybe watch every year.
Yeah.
Next Halloween. Also watched Don't Worry, Darling, which I know you've seen, and it was fine. I feel like it was better than I expected. But I probably would have liked it more if there wasn't so much weird hype around it, and I didn't know that like anything about the drama of the making of the film or the, you know, I just feel like it just had so much baggage that didn't have anything to do with the movie that like, I mean, it was a good kind of like adult kind of adult kind of family thriller.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the kind of movie that you could go watch on Thanksgiving with your parents or something, you know?
Yeah.
And everybody would enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it's kind of like a Black Mirror episode. Spoilers again ahead. Like you were talking about when you watched it with the ending. You know, I feel like it could have been like, I get that the film is like a metaphor for like the patriarchy and stuff, but I feel like it didn't really have anything to say about it, like anything new or anything like anything really. It was just like I feel like it could have been more, but you know, maybe there's something there that I'm not seeing. I don't know.
And I feel that That's the crux of it now. We get in film criticism, I feel like it's evening out. Because we had all those people that went to see it and were like, yeah, this is awful. Here's all the stuff that's been happening. And like you said, there's people that are now watching it at home after hearing all that and being like, yeah, it's not as bad as that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, calm down. So it's kind of evening out in terms of, you know, I think it is a middle-of-the-road film. It's a 2.5, 3-star film. You know, it's not amazing, but I think the people that are really slating it really slate it. I mean, Harry Styles does not dance very well in this film. That scene where he's dancing at the like office party is incredibly terrible. But hey, you know, there's been worse actors on screen.
Yeah. And then besides all of those, I did finally rewatch Heavenly Creatures from 1994, and it's amazing. I'm not going to give anything away.
Yeah.
But because I really want you to see it. But yeah, Peter Jackson. I mean, we watched and talked about Dead Alive / Brain Dead at the beginning of Horror Movie Month, and it's interesting after watching that and then watching Heavenly Creatures. Like you can immediately tell that it's the same filmmaker. Mm-hmm. You know, the shots and the style and everything. But Heavenly Creatures is it's just one of those films that just makes me feel so many different emotions. Like it just takes you on this like incredible human experience that like that it's like in my top 4 favorite films ever.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I can't wait for you to see it.
Point. It's on my list.
Yeah.
So hopefully, did you watch that via streaming or was it something that you own?
It was something I had.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
good to know.
Yeah. Well, I will have to pick it at some point, I think, for Film Church. But that's it.
Bye,
folks. It is time for our feature presentation.
That's right.
Welcome to Sin City. This town beckons the tough, the corrupt, the broken-hearted. Some call it dark, hard-boiled. Then there are those who call it home. Crooked cops, sexy dames, desperate vigilantes. Some are seeking revenge. Others lust after redemption. And then there are those hoping for a little bit of both. A universe of unlikely and reluctant heroes still trying to do the right thing in a city that refuses to care. This is Sin City 2005. Yeah!
That's right.
Episode 50. So at any point, Lewis, feel free to interrupt me, because I feel like I'm just going to ramble and talk, and you'll never get to say anything.
I know that this is one of your favorite filmmakers.
Yeah.
And like you said at the top, this is one of your favorite films. And I feel like I did the same thing when it was like Sherlock Jr. So I am very ready to let you kind of say your piece.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I have lots to say. It was interesting going back and watching this because I haven't watched it in a long time. And like I said at the beginning, you know, this was my favorite film from like age 17 to 20.
Yeah.
My brain wasn't fully developed at the time. But like, so, and I haven't watched it in a long time, like I said. So I was really curious to see what I thought about it now because I feel like I'm a completely different person.
Yeah.
Than I was back then. And just my knowledge of film is just greater, you know?
Yeah.
So you and I watched it together, actually.
We sure did.
A few days ago. And I wasn't sure about it. You know, I was like, there's parts of it that I like, you know, I like the style still and stuff.
Yeah.
But it just, you know, it didn't really sink in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I rewatched it today, and it did sink in. Like it was like, I do really like this movie. This is, it's such a like masculine movie. I feel like it's such a guy movie. Which makes sense. Like when you go and look at who Frank Miller is, you know, he's the guy who created the comic book. This is a graphic novel, or the movie is based off the graphic novel Sin City. And Frank Miller is known for creating Daredevil. Well, not creating Daredevil, but he's known for his run, like his writing on Daredevil, the Daredevil comic book. He did Daredevil Born Again. He did The Dark Knight Returns, which is a huge inspiration for like all the Batman movies. He did Batman Year One, and Sin City and 300. And Sin City was kind of like a personal project of his. Like he created, you know, it wasn't like a Marvel thing or a DC thing. It was like he created it out of like, I'm going to create a comic book that's kind of just for me. Yeah. It's got fast cars. It's got babes. It's got guys in trench coats. You know, it's going to be black and white with like tiny little splashes of color. And the novel to look at is like the style is really cool. You know, it's like not, it's very simplistic, but you know, it looks kind of like the movie. You know, it's just like deep blacks and just like completely whited out whites. And there's, you know, there was just something about the film that hit me when I was 17. You know, it was like I already did like black and white movies. You know, I was really into Hitchcock and older films and stuff. And this was like, and I was into comic book movies. You know, I loved Spider-Man. I loved The Punisher. And this was like all of that, all of my favorite things, you know? Yeah. Obviously the film has like problematic stuff in it. And you know, some stuff is a little weird. But just the visual style is amazing to me. And even though you know, some of the dialogue I think is kind of cheesy, like it felt really cheesy the other day when we watched it, but then once you kind of just like give into it, I guess, it just didn't seem as cheesy anymore to me, I guess. I think the actors do really well. Like for the dialogue that they have, they did an amazing job of making it believable. Especially Brittany Murphy. Like she kind of blows me away in this film. What were you gonna say?
Just that I think that the dialogue is very clever because it is lampooning the noir films of the 40s and 50s. You know, and we kind of talked about it a little bit while we were watching it. Just the men that are tough as nails and the women that just need to be saved and you know, all that kind of stuff. The trouble with it is because even though that language is good, it is still a product of the early 2000s, and the male gaze in this film is that's all there is. You know, there's when you were saying that like there was a lot that drew you to it when you were younger. I mean, there was one thing that drew me to this film when I was younger, and that was Jessica Alba. And the film does a good job at just being like, here she is, you know, here's your fantasy, which is like a 14, 15-year-old. That was exactly what I wanted. So, but yeah, like watching it now, it's always hard because because we've come such a long way, and because we're kind of the filmmaking has come such a long way in terms of where the camera is and kind of what we should be focused on, that when we watch films like this, it's hard to put yourself in that mindset again. Of being like, okay, this is from, you know, nearly 20 years ago now.
Exactly. Yeah, because I was thinking, you know, when you watch this film and you compare it to like other film noirs of the 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, there's a lot of problematic stuff about those films. You know, obviously they're older and maybe you can give them more leniency or whatever. I don't know. But like, it's not 2005 anymore. I mean, that was also the year. Wasn't that the year that Idiocracy came out?
Mhm,
It was like
mhm.
2004. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of time has passed. It's been
Yeah.
almost 20 years.
And if you think of 20 years before 2005, we're in the 80s, and Ghostbusters was out, a big, huge success that is openly racist and sexist.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, we can see that development. And I think that, again, going back to even, Birth of a Nation, the fact that it's still being talked about is the fact that, as I feel like as film lovers, that it's significant, even though the subject matter can be troubling.
Yeah.
It's like literature. There's books that you can read that are like, okay, that, I don't agree with that, but I know that this is culturally significant for many reasons.
Yeah.
And I feel that's the same with this film. I feel that there's a lot in here that changed how superhero films in this, and how kind of stylized films went forward for the next 10 years. We're still seeing, we're still seeing Sin City in film, like Marvel films and other films, this very stylized, over the top
graphic novel-esque.
Yeah.
Comic
exactly.
booky kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, Robert Rodriguez had to kind of work to get Frank Miller to say yes to this, because like you think about, like, Frank Miller had already done so much to kind of change the direction of comic books. He was already making a huge impact, and seeing his work adapted into films. But Sin City was like his baby. He wasn't just going to be like, yeah, sure, do it. So Robert had to like constantly call his representatives and like really work to get in touch with them. And then finally, when he got a hold of them, he was still like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he created the first sequence. There's like a prologue and an epilogue, the beginning and the end of the film. The prologue was test footage, and they ended up using it for the movie. But he filmed that just to be like, let's take a day, shoot these 3 pages, and let me show you what it's going to look like, and then you can decide. And Frank Miller was like, how are you going to shoot this in a day? Like, he was used to Hollywood. And Robert Rodriguez is not Hollywood. Rodriguez is like, no, we're going to do this in my garage and get it done in a day and still make it look amazing. And then Frank Miller was blown away by it, said yes to it, and came on as co-director, which Robert had to leave the Directors Guild to bring him on as co-director.
Yeah.
Which, when you're involved in the Directors Guild, or when you're not, like if you leave the Directors Guild, that means you lose like a ton of benefits. Like you lose being able to work on studio films, like big budget studio films. You lose like getting nominated for anything at the Academy Awards. And all that kind of stuff. So it was like, it kind of just cemented his rebel status, I guess.
Yeah.
But he's been doing stuff like that his whole career, which is one of the reasons I love the guy. I think he was supposed to do the John Carter film for Disney, like was developing it around that time. And when he left the guild, he like lost that contract.
Yeah.
And which he might be back in it by now. I don't really know, because now he is doing, or maybe the way that it works has changed, because he's done like the Boba Fett series and stuff.
Yeah.
But he seems like such a good pull. Like I almost wonder. I mean, it might be because he left the guild, but why he hasn't done like DC films? Because after Sin City, Frank Miller went on to do 300, which he wouldn't have done if he hadn't have done Sin City. Like he realized, I can make, adapt my work into films, and it look the way I want it to, and be a part of it. So 300 was Frank Miller and Zack Snyder, and then Zack Snyder did The Watchmen, and then Superman, Batman versus Superman, Justice League.
Yeah.
And like you just look at the way that working with Frank took Zack Snyder's career off. But it's also possible that Robert didn't want that. Like he's always just been like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. You know. But then again, Robert Rodriguez has also done a lot of commercial work. Like he's done like a ton of like, I don't know, just weird stuff that you like. He did a basketball commercial for Nike and like, and he always does like with everything he does, he like does behind the scenes stuff with it. But I feel like I'm just kind of going on a tangent now, but yeah, I mean, I really feel like, especially after rewatching Sin City, that Robert should be making DC films.
Yeah.
And I know that, like, now that James Gunn is head of DC, they're doing a lot of DC shows within the DC universe. I could see Robert doing a show or something like that, which would be cool. Like something within the Gotham world, or I don't know. It would just be cool to see something like that. But
I think it all depends on the style that DC are trying to create. Because I mean, as a viewer, we know that their output has been so disjointed. We've had realism, and then we've had Aquaman, which is super comic booky and bright and like interesting direction, I guess. So it just depends. I think kind of on the project. If it was something that he could just make look as insane and over the top as possible, then great. I think that if it was something like the Batman that was so grounded in reality and just normal dust and dirt and grime that I don't know. I feel like he polishes it to make it look a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what he does next. I'm always excited to see what he's doing. There's a film that he did a few years ago. I just put it on my list. It's not very highly rated on Letterboxd, but I'm still gonna give it a shot just because I love Robert Rodriguez. Yeah. But he did a movie called Red 11 that he made for like $7,000.
Okay.
Just a few years ago, just to prove that he could still do it.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, his kind of breakout, the way that Robert Rodriguez broke out as a filmmaker was he made a Spanish language action film for $7,000, and took it. Didn't really expect it to do anything. Like he thought he was going to sell it to the Spanish video market, and then use the money to make a sequel, and then like just keep kind of doubling his budget until he had enough money to make like a really big film.
Mm-hmm.
But just right off the bat with this first film, he decided to go to Hollywood and kind of show it to some, like he cut a trailer together after the film was already finished and showed it to some execs, and the executives didn't believe that he had only spent $7,000 on it. They were just kind of blown away. And then all of a sudden he was in. Like all the producers were talking about him. People were sending him around town. He was talking with all these producers until someone was like, we're going to send this to Sundance. And he sent it, and it got in. It got bought by, I think, Columbia, and then re-released, had a theatrical release. And I mean, it did well. And then basically after that, he did remake it. He sort of did like a sequel / remake with Antonio Banderas, which is Desperado. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, I was talking about Red 11. Yeah, so he made Red 11. But the thing that I love about Rodriguez is he's just so inspiring. Like you go and watch the behind the scenes stuff on Sin City. He's got like this 10-minute. He calls it a 10-minute flick school, which you can also find on YouTube, where he kind of shows you how he's still kind of doing the same process that he's always done, even when he did El Mariachi. Like he made, I think, Sin City for $40 million, which most of that I think was spent on the cast, which is, there's a huge, A-list cast, but he was able to work around their schedules. Most of the cast were never in the same room together. I mean, Brittany Murphy was only on set for one day, and she's in like all three stories, I think, and has interactions with different characters, and even but even like, I mean, you think about the way that films like this are made nowadays. Like almost every single comic book movie, all the Marvel movies are made in a studio on a green screen set, right?
Yeah.
So this is how it's done now. But the way that Rodriguez did it back in 2005, like he only had like a corner. He had just a little studio, and he made this whole movie in a corner. And so like the shots where like there's like a really cool shot where the camera starts behind the car as it's driving. It goes up into a God's eye view and does a 180 spin and then comes back down in front of the car. And the way that they got this shot was they had the car sitting on a 360 spinning block, so they could just keep shooting in the same corner, and all they did was raise the camera up and bring it back down.
Wow.
And then once they green screened it out, they were able to make it look like the camera is like moving all around the car.
Wow.
And he just like breaks everything down like that for you. He even has a feature on the film where you can watch the entire film with no effects. You're just watching the entire thing on with the actors on the green screen, so you can see how they did it, which is really cool. He's just such a like down to earth dude. You know what I mean? Like he's even got like on most of his films, he's got like a 10-minute cooking school that he's been doing since Once Upon a Time in Mexico. He did like this. There's a dish that one of the characters eats in the film, and it's like a whole like thing in the movie, right? So he in the behind the scenes, he like shows people how to make it. And then people loved it so much that he started doing like recipes on every single one of his DVDs. And so for Sin City, he does like these Sin City breakfast tacos, which look amazing. Like, it's like he like shows you how to make homemade tortillas too, which is great. And yes, I have made them before. So like
the breakfast tacos or tortillas, just in general.
Well, both actually. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not as hard as you might think, but
No.
I mean, it's just fun. Like, and then, and I kind of got into Rodriguez before I was even into Tarantino. I think the way that I got into Rodriguez was there was a quote unquote film boot camp that was being held at like our local library in Nacogdoches.
Yeah.
And it was held by a film school graduate from SFA, the local university. And at that school, they did this cool thing where they made a feature every summer. And usually the person directing the feature was like someone in graduate school. So he had made a feature with the school. And then I think he was like teaching high school at the time, but he put on this like, this weekend, like boot camp, like how to make a movie. And he like, it was like I can't remember how long it was, but I think I was 17 at the time or almost 17. And, he knew a lot about Robert Rodriguez. Like he was a big fan. And I just like had so much fun in that class.
Yeah.
And then like I like stayed for hours just talking to this guy about films and filmmaking and like what I was trying to do. And he started talking to me about Robert Rodriguez and all of his films and Sin City and his book Rebel Without a Crew. And I think that's kind of what just sparked like my interest in Robert Rodriguez. And then I probably had seen Kill Bill. Yeah, I mean, I must have seen Kill Bill at that point already. So when I found out that like Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino were friends, I was like, this is amazing, you know. And then later on down the road, like we've talked about Kevin Smith. I think on the Clerks 2 behind the scenes DVD, there's like some behind the scenes footage where he has Quentin and Robert over to his house and he's like showing them a cut of Clerks 2. And I'm like, oh my God, they all know each other. This is amazing. Yeah, it just seems like, I don't know. It just got me even more into like these indie filmmakers from the early 90s, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I bought like Rodriguez's mariachi trilogy. Like there's El Mariachi, Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and just like consumed every single thing that was out there that he did, and all his behind the scenes stuff, and really took a lot of inspiration from his just his filmmaking style, because he's also like a family filmmaker. Like he involves all of his family, his kids. His wife has been a producer on every single thing he's done. Some of his siblings, you know, the whole Austin community, because he built kind of like this hub in Austin. Like I remember hearing about early on in his career when I can't remember what studio it was, but he got like an office at some big studio, and then he started bringing his kids to work, and they were like, oh, you can't do that. And he's like, all right, well, I quit. Going back to Austin. Yeah, just stuff like that. He's always been such an inspiring person for me, you know, as a filmmaker. You know, and he and Richard Linklater kind of built up the Austin Film Society and stuff, and really built kind of that hub there in Austin, which is cool. And I'm from Texas, if you don't know and you're listening. But it was just always so cool to be like, oh my God, like this person is like here.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that far away. You know, it's like Hollywood seems like so just such a like crazy dream, you know, but like here's this guy that like brought Hollywood to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he's working with Bruce Willis and Elijah Wood and Clive Owen and, you know, all of these people. It's just great. And like, yeah, so maybe we should talk more about Sin City. But yeah, I mean, I'm like, speaking of Elijah Wood, I'm a huge fan of his. Like he always does. Like ever since Lord of the Rings, he's like been able to be very selective of what he does. And he had worked with Robert before, and that's probably, you know, one of the reasons he did this. But he also lived in Austin, I think. So that was helpful. But who are your favorite characters, do you think, or actors in this?
That's a good one. I think it's always good to see Bruce Willis around this time.
Yeah.
He was kind of having that like mini renaissance after Sixth Sense. You know, he was still a bit of a box office draw. He hadn't, you know, beaten Die Hard into the ground just yet. So it's always great to see him in a good role, and he does really well in it. Yeah. I like Clive Owen as well. We were saying when we were watching it that Clive Owen is another one of these actors that kind of is like ebbs and flows a little bit. Yeah. I feel like we see him a lot and then we don't see him at all, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really good to see him in a good role.
Yeah.
And like you said, Brittany Murphy is, you know, we both at the same time were like, I miss Brittany Murphy.
Yeah.
You know, it is good to see it. Unfortunately, Jessica Alba doesn't stand up great. I don't think that she was particularly good in this film. Yeah. Same year as the Fantastic Four, so I'm sure her comic book allegiance was torn.
Yeah.
But hey, 14-year-old me did not care.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she's fine in the movie.
Yeah. She doesn't have a lot to do, and I think that, like you said, I don't know Again, I don't know whether this is time that's put this on there. I assume that it was always supposed to be a bit weird, but the fact that she's supposed to be 19 or 18, and the last time she saw the man that she was in love with, she was 7?
Yeah,
or 8,
something
or
like
something
that.
like
Yeah.
that.
I think.
Which immediately when
Or
they
maybe-
kiss and stuff is very like, okay.
Yeah, and there's like a couple of like, I don't know. There's a couple of very like problematic lines. Like the whole situation is just problematic, but then they like it goes too. I mean, it's hard to say it goes. I mean, it does go too far, but it's already gone too far.
Yeah.
But like there's like a line where he's like, "She grew up, she filled out." It's like, ugh, gross.
Yeah, I know.
But like again, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. You think about like Leon the Professional, like that was in the 90s, and that was, I don't know what to call it. It's problematic, but I don't know if it's like, is it some weird like guy fetish that's like just sitting here in this film and like,
I mean, Taxi Driver.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. So.
I do want to preface with that though. I mean, I know that Taxi Driver does show her as like a 14-year-old prostitute, but it's also for the fact that she needs to be taken away from this.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas both this and Leon the Professional are more like, I don't know, played for the male audience.
Yeah.
So
it's just a weird. It's like, it's almost like this weird thing where they're like trying to get away with something. They're trying to get away with like doing this problematic situation in a way that we're like, oh, it's fine. He's not into it and he's trying to protect her or whatever. But it's just like.
And I think it's definitely the way you go into this film. If you go into this film and you think, okay, they're making fun of all these films that have come before and this kind of whole style of like the man saving the dame and like her being there for eye candy, then it's great, and it does its job. If you watch this film as like, no, that wasn't what they were going for. They were going for something else. It's very hard to not find that disturbing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the film is bad because I really enjoyed this film. And there's a lot in there that it's just an incredible thing to look at first and foremost. You know, it's unlike anything you see on the screen. But you can't escape it. But there's so many films that are the same way. There's so many films that when you watch them, you're like. We said the same thing about when we did our Sergio Leone series. Mm-hmm. If there was one more woman that got like sexually assaulted in his films, I would have just been like, I would have given up because every single time there was a rape involved.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, maybe it's the time, maybe that's part of the era. I don't know, but this does. That is troubling.
Yeah. But the style of the film, like you said, it's amazing to look at. Like I think that's what I love so much about the film is the way that it looks. It's like the ultimate black and white comic movie. You know what I mean? Like the second time I watched it on my MacBook, which has an HDR display, and it looked incredible. I was like, it almost made me think, like, I wonder if this film is going to just get better and better over time.
Yeah.
At least visually. You know what I mean? Because it's one of the first films. It's not the very first, but it's one of the first to go all digital.
Yeah.
To do everything on green screen. And and for it to still look so good 20 years later, I think it means something. You know, I'm not so sure that but it's like doing it on purpose, right? Like you can tell that things are animated, but it's like a part of the world. Like you believe the world, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't.
Whereas you look at some comic book movies, even from just a few years ago, and you're like, it doesn't look. I don't feel like the world is real. I feel like it's fake. I feel like people are on a green screen.
Well, this is where it excels, because it doesn't look like a film that is 20 years old. You know, when you watch it, I think the thing that works for it is the style is all its own. The costumes for the characters are kind of a vintage anyway, so it that doesn't age. And yeah, the style is so singular. You know, no technology or no techniques from that era kind of seep in.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's kind of this timeless thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can't really put a timestamp on it, and I think that's what's going to work with it as we progress through the years. Is that it's always going to look like that. It's not going to diminish the look of it over time because it is so singular.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a roundabout way to say it, but
yeah, I was also thinking too that it's like it is hard to like say what year this film takes place.
Yeah.
As you're watching it, because it's like all the cars look old, like all the cars are vintage, but then the girl has like a cell phone at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So it does kind of create its own world. Like I was even thinking when Clive Owen jumps out of the window, Dwight, when he's jumping out of the window and Brittany Murphy is behind him and she's like, cop, you know, or, you know, you think she's saying stop at first. I was like, I guess they don't have cell phones. She can't just call him and be like, hey, he's a cop.
Yeah.
But then the girl has a cell phone at the end, but it's like, it doesn't matter.
No.
It's like, they've created their own world that you believe. Like, everything is hyper, like nothing is realistic. And you just buy it, you know, you just kind of accept the world, you know, and live in it.
Yeah, it's very video gamey. You know, it reminded me, you know, there's parallels between like Grand Theft Auto, where it's obviously based on an American city, you know, but it's not really of a time or place. It's just a city.
Yeah.
You know,
Sin City.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it is a film I hadn't been back to for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I am pleased to say that it still does the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I mean, and like we said, you know, there's some things in there that aren't great, but you can, like, I think that you just have to, but especially with old films, you just have to take a step back, you know, and be like, okay, this was made at a certain time and a certain place.
Yeah.
We've progressed, but it's still a valuable piece of art.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, when I went and bought this film, I can't remember what year it was, but it was sometime in between 17 and 20, I'm sure. My age, not the year. So this would have been like 2007 to 2010.
Yeah.
And I bought the box set, which was called the Ultimate Sin edition. It was like a big, thick box.
Yeah.
And it had a copy of one of the comic books, like one of his graphic novels in it. So you could like actually look at the pages and like compare them and stuff. And I remember when I went and bought it, I went up to the cash register. I can't remember how, I want to say it was probably around $60. Because it was like a box set. And I went up to the cash register and there's this young guy like around my age and he's like, that's a lot for Sin City. And I was like, but it's the ultimate sin. And yeah, I was like, I don't give a fuck if people don't like this movie. I loved the movie. You know what I mean? Like, Yeah, just the greatest. And it's not my favorite film anymore. You know, it's not.
No.
It's probably not even in my top 10 anymore. But it films like this that like you loved at a certain age will
Yeah.
always hold like this special
Yeah.
place. And I could rewatch all the behind the scenes stuff on this a million times. You know.
I mean, this film for me is always going to be special. It's the first film I owned on Steelbook.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I remember, I think I must have got it for Christmas on my birthday. But it was just a black cover, and it just black all the way around. And then
Yeah.
it just had the Sin City like logo embossed on it. And I thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
I loved it so much.
You still have it?
I still have it at home, yeah, in England.
Nice.
It's DVD, obviously, because I don't think Blu-ray was out just yet.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably just kind
Coming
of starting
soon.
to break through.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't have my box set anymore.
Oh no! Why?
God made me get rid of it.
You were like Ultimate Edition. Pff, not anymore.
No, literally, it was a time when God was speaking to me and telling me I had to get rid of my movie collection because I loved it too much.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, one of the biggest regrets is getting rid of my collection around, I don't know how, I think I was like 20 or 21. All those first movies I bought that I snuck into the house like drugs.
Yeah. No, I had the opposite. I feel like my parents can definitely relate that some entity kept telling me to buy more, coming back with stacks and stacks of DVDs.
Yeah, man, I had a lot of stuff, but yeah, if I could get it back, if I could go back, I would.
Yeah.
One day I'll buy my collection back.
Yeah.
Do you have any? I mean, I could talk about this film like on and on. Like I wrote down a bunch of trivia. Like I recommend everybody go. Like if you're a filmmaker, Rebel Without a Crew is essential reading.
Yeah.
Like that is the first book you should read. There are so many things that inspiration and things that you can take. Like Rebel Without a Crew is actually like it's just a journal. Like it's literally just Robert Rodriguez's journal from the time that he decided that he was going to make a feature, and it's just journal entries. It's like got the date on it and everything, and you can literally read his progress and read his break into fame. Like even up into like going to Sundance and like, hey, I met this guy named Quentin Tarantino today. He's got this film here called Reservoir Dogs, and we talked about this and this, and like, and it's just so inspiring because there was along the way he's just like, you know, I'm gonna do this. This person's telling me I can't, but I figured out a way to do it. I'm gonna do it this way. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah, essential film reading for any filmmaker. But yeah, like I said, I could keep talking about this movie forever if you want. But do you have anything else to say, or do you have any questions that I might be able to answer?
No questions. I mean, I know that there was a sequel made to it, A Dame to Kill For, that didn't quite hit the heights of this Sin City. I don't think it's mentioned kind of in the same breath anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I went to see it in the cinema, I can remember that, and I can't remember a lot about it.
Yeah.
Probably for the best, I would say. But, I mean, it is a film that can stand on its own,
Yeah.
I don't think it needed a sequel.
Yeah, and from what I understand, they also used all the best stories in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a stretch to try to get some more out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of the cast returned and stuff, and we didn't mention. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning Mickey Rourke's in it, but he's also one of the best parts. He looks. They did such a good job on his makeup, making that character in the comic and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone. Bruce Willis, Mickey Rourke, Benicio del Toro, Jessica Alba, Rosario Dawson is like incredible.
Yeah.
Brittany Murphy, Clive Owen, Carla Gugino, or Gugino, is awesome.
Yeah.
She's so good in everything and beautiful. Michael Madsen is I feel like so underrated. I mean, he's been in a ton of Tarantino stuff, but like
Yeah.
I don't know why he's not in like more big movies. Elijah Wood is awesome. Nick Offerman,
I know. Yeah.
it was so weird to see him pop up. Michael Clark Duncan, Nick Stahl, who plays the Yellow Bastard, does a really good job as the Yellow Bastard, and he looks, like a Yellow Bastard. Yeah, also plays John Connor in Terminator 3.
Yeah.
Beloved by many. Not really. Nick Stahl is good, but
yeah,
I don't know about Terminator 3. But yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that. I just felt like reading everybody that was in the film because we didn't really talk about everyone. But,
it is a really good cast.
Yeah.
And everyone pulls their weight. Everyone's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, that's Sin City.
Yeah.
We did it. We're going to have to do El Mariachi at some point, I think.
Yeah.
I'm excited to find out what we're watching next week, but let's first guess what each other rated the film on Letterboxd.
Let's do it. I think for you, it's got to be a 5. Okay. I mean, you said that it's not in your top 10 anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that emotional reaction to it and the memories will put it up to a 5.
Yeah. You would be correct before I even guess.
Yeah.
I was questioning it when we watched it the other day. I was like,
is it?
It's just such a different time now. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm such a different person, but then rewatching it again today, I was just like, man, I love this movie.
Yeah.
It looks amazing, and it just brings back so much memories of that time. I mean, 2005, it's a time and place, and I feel like this fits right in it. It's like that emo culture, too, of that time, you know?
Yeah.
It kind of fits in with the style of that era, too, you know? I'm going to say you rated this film... I feel like there's got to be some nostalgia in there for you too. I almost want to rate it lower, but I think your nostalgia is going to bring it up.
I told you I had this poster on my wall at university. So.
Yeah. Well, that makes me want to bring it up even more. I mean,
if we're talking about that poster, it's a 5-star poster.
Yeah. Is it the one with Jessica Alba on it?
Yeah, it's just
her,
Alba
right?
one. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna say 4.
Yeah, you'd be correct.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's probably always been a 4. I probably was a little hotter on it when I was younger, but I think it's singular. You know, it's stylized. It's great to look at. I mean, it's dated, but you can't take that away from it. I think that it's a very significant part in superhero and comic book style movies. Yeah. That kind of changed what was to come. So
do you think that like post, once we get out of this comic book era of
will we ever?
Eventually. Yeah. Eventually.
Yeah.
As with musicals and westerns, we'll eventually get out of this.
Yeah.
And once we are, it's going to take even years after we finally get out of it to kind of reflect on the whole era of comic book movies. Yeah. Do you think this is going to be one of the standouts?
Yeah, I think when you're talking non-Marvel superhero films, I think this, Watchmen, Dark Knight, they're the kind of the ones that you'll you'll talk about outside of Marvel.
Yeah.
And I think for a certain this feels. I can remember watching this for the first time, and I was like, this is a comic book movie that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
So I think it will definitely kind of keep in that arena of being one of the best non-Marvel superhero films.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't like to include it with Marvel because I think that's doing it a disservice.
Yeah.
I think that Marvel is so formulaic and so by the numbers that you can't compare them.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think Logan will probably be talked about too, but Logan isn't when you're talking about Marvel, that's not MCU Marvel,
No. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can't wait to find out what we're watching next week because I know it's gonna be good.
Yes. Well, I hope so. It was a toss-up. It was either a film that I had never seen before, that is always kind of sitting there on the list to watch, or is a film that I had seen before and that I absolutely loved and just wanted a reason to talk about it.
Yeah.
I plumped for the one that I had never seen.
Okay.
So we are going to be watching a film noir from 1958, directed towards the end of the film noir period, directed by Orson Welles, Touch of Evil.
Ooh, nice.
Yes, a film that I own. Never got around to watching it. All-star cast, which we'll talk in great detail next week. But Orson Welles, Charlton Heston, Janet Leigh, Marlene Dietrich, Jar Jar Gabor, amongst others.
Wow. I've heard so much about this movie. I mean, I know nothing about this movie,
too,
but I've heard so much about this movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen bits of it. I know that Mark Cousins in his Story of Film kind of references certain parts of it quite a bit. So I feel like I've seen parts of it, but I have no idea about story or like characterization. So I'm very, very excited to tick this off the to-watch list.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cannot wait. That's going to be awesome. Episode 51. That'll be next week into the next 50 episodes.
That's right.
Wow. Can't believe it. Well, everybody, that brings us to the end of the show. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at Film Church Radio. You can follow us individually on Letterboxd, where you can see what we've been watching for the week, see what we rate things, see what's on our watch list. I am at Selman Scope, and Lewis is at Walker Lewis 3007. We also have all of our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms. Please leave us a rating and review so we know if you like the film, and let us know what you would like for us to watch in the future so we can put it on our watch list. The only thing I have left to say, Lewis, is ask yourself if that corpse of a dame is worth dying for.
Worth dying for. Worth killing for. Worth going to hell for. Amen.
Amen. See you next week.
Peace.